You're standing inside an invisible field of influence right now. Not one governed by chance or chaos, but one shaped entirely by your energetic responses to every moment, a field woven from the threads of your words, your boundaries, your silences, your forgiveness, your timing, and the way you show up when someone crosses you or honors you. You think you're just living your life, moving through days, reacting to what comes. But here's what you haven't been told. Every single choice you make in relationship to another human being is writing code into the quantum field. And that code determines what reality reflects back to you. This isn't metaphor. This is the actual mathematics of consciousness meeting game theory. And once you see how it works, you can never unsee it. Consider something most people think is trivial. Someone commits to something with you, then quietly breaks that commitment. Maybe they don't text back. Maybe they cancel last minute. Maybe they just ghost on a promise. You let it slide because you don't want tension. They do it again. Now you're at a crossroads, but not the one you think. You're not deciding whether to confront them about logistics. You're deciding what frequency you're broadcasting into your relational field. Do you hold coherence and enforce clarity now, or do you tolerate misalignment to avoid discomfort later? You're not managing schedules. You're programming the vibrational blueprint of how people interface with your energy. That's the hidden layer. Not the behavior itself, but what your energetic response teaches the field about what's acceptable when engaging with you. Here's the deeper truth most people walk past their entire lives. Reality isn't constructed by actions alone. Reality is shaped by the responses those actions generate. Someone can lie to you, use you, diminish you, dismiss you, but only if the field recognizes no energetic consequence for doing so. Someone can show up with integrity, generosity, care, and consistency, but only if the field recognizes that cooperation is amplified and mirrored back. The invisible game you're always inside isn't about what someone does to you. It's about what future pattern that behavior creates based on how you respond. And here's the part that changes everything. You don't get neutral ground in this game. This is where the illusion breaks for most people. You think if you don't engage, if you stay peaceful, if you avoid confrontation, if you just keep it chill, then you're outside the game. You're not. Choosing not to respond is still a response. Silence carries frequency. Letting something go without addressing it is feedback to the field. Tolerating disrespect teaches the quantum code that disrespect is safe around you. You're always, always, always in communication with the field. The question isn't whether you're playing. The question is whether you're playing with awareness or playing unconsciously, while reality encodes your tolerance as permission. The moment you recognize that every interaction is a micro-calibration with long-term ripples, everything shifts. You stop wondering why people repeat the same patterns with you. You allowed it energetically. You stop being confused when someone escalates behavior you tolerated once. You gave the field permission to test further. You stop trying to control isolated moments and instead start shaping the larger frequency you're emitting. And this is where real power emerges, because while most people operate on emotional reactivity and inconsistent boundaries, the small percentage who understand how to move through relational fields with conscious reciprocity can create entirely different outcomes without force, without drama, without losing their center. They don't win by being louder. They win by becoming energetically unmistakable. So here's the trap almost everyone falls into once they wake up to the game. They immediately try to dominate it. They think awareness means getting the advantage, proving they can't be fooled, making sure no one ever takes anything from them again, showing strength by never being vulnerable. It sounds empowering. In practice, it's self-sabotage dressed as strategy, because you can absolutely win a single exchange and lose the entire relational ecosystem. You can prove your point and collapse the trust required for the next 100 interactions that could have supported you. That's the paradox no one mentions in self-help culture. The kind of winning that feels like victory in the moment is often the kind that costs you the most over time. You've witnessed this pattern before, even if you didn't have language for it. The person who dominates every conversation but slowly finds themselves with fewer people who want to be around them, the individual who negotiates so aggressively. They secure the short-term deal but never get called back for the long-term relationship. The partner who must always be correct and then can't understand why intimacy evaporated. They believe they're winning. Energetically, they're hemorrhaging relational currency because they optimized for ego validation instead of sustained connection. This is where quantum game theory reveals something most consciousness teachings miss. In a single interaction field, it can feel accurate to prioritize self-protection, control, or strategic manipulation, because the only thing being measured is one outcome. But human reality doesn't operate in isolated incidents. Human reality is a repeating field. It's relationship over time. And when people sense that you'll betray trust, manipulate vulnerability, guilt trip for leverage, or overpower to get your way, they stop offering openness. They stop extending benefit of the doubt. They start engaging with you from a defended frequency. And when two people lock into defensive mode, no one gains anymore. That's what's called a defection spiral in game theory. And it's where relationships, teams, families, and even entire movements disintegrate. Now consider the opposite polarity. The person who avoids all confrontation because they can't tolerate discomfort. They smooth over violations, they absorb disrespect. They try to fix everything by being endlessly understanding. But here's what they don't realize. Generosity without boundaries isn't love. It's an open invitation for the field to extract from you. And quantum principles confirm this. When one frequency consistently offers without reciprocal flow, the field learns that taking has no consequence. Not because people are inherently malicious, but because the energetic system rewards what goes unchecked. So you end up with two types of people who lose the long game. The one who fights for dominance every time and ends up isolated. The one who surrenders every time and ends up depleted. Different strategies, same entropic result. They lose because they're not interfacing with the actual structure of the game. The real answer is simple, but it requires you to shift your entire frame. Winning isn't about crushing or yielding. It's about selecting a relational frequency that creates the highest sustained coherence over time. The person who plays for ego always loses to the person who plays for continuity. The person who needs external validation always loses to the person who operates from structural integrity. The person who battles for every minor win is perpetually confused when the entire war collapses. And this is precisely why the strategy we're building toward, the one that outperforms nearly every other approach, isn't rooted in aggression, passivity, or manipulation. It's rooted in balance. It's predictable. It's equitable. It rewards collaboration, addresses violation immediately, and releases resentment without weaponizing the past. This strategy shifted everything when it was tested. And in the next layer, you'll see exactly how it dismantled the most sophisticated approaches ever designed. So if the conventional approaches fail, the real question becomes this: what actually creates sustained alignment? What frequency doesn't just feel right temporarily, but generates coherent outcomes over time regardless of who you're engaging with? That's the question a researcher named Robert Axelrod sought to answer. But instead of theorizing, he did something extraordinary. He constructed a simulation of human interaction. He invited the most strategic minds across disciplines, game theorists, behavioral economists, military strategists, cognitive psychologists, to design algorithmic programs that would compete in an iterated relational field and demonstrate which framework wins over time. Each participant arrived with their model. Some built programs on deception and misdirection. Others engineered intimidation sequences. A few designed randomness generators to stay unpredictable. Some created long-term computational matrices so intricate they resembled classified intelligence operations. It was the ultimate test of relational strategy. If there was a hidden pattern that could dominate both cooperation and conflict, someone in this tournament would uncover it. But what emerged victorious wasn't complex. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't aggressive. And it certainly wasn't manipulative. The winning frequency was composed of 4 simple principles that a child could grasp. Begin with openness. Mirror whatever energy you receive. Forgive immediately when the other frequency corrects. No hidden agendas, no preemptive strikes, no clever tactics. Just clarity, proportionality, and instant recalibration. Here's how the code operated. It always initiated with cooperative energy. When the other program cooperated, it continued cooperation. When the other program defected, it instantly reflected that defection, but only for 1 round. And when the other program returned to cooperation, it released the past and resumed collaborative frequency. That elegant feedback loop dismantled strategies built on exploitation. It outperformed approaches rooted in greed. It neutralized aggressive frequencies, exposed false cooperators, and naturally formed alliances with authentic ones. Even more profound, it never won by annihilating opponents. It won by generating the maximum cooperative field, preventing prolonged conflict, and introducing just enough consequence that violation became energetically expensive to repeat. That's why the results stunned the research community. Everyone assumed the optimal path was domination, but the data revealed otherwise. The strategy that wins most consistently isn't the one that defeats everyone else. It's the one that makes others want to stay in coherence with you. And the reason it surpassed nearly every other approach is elegantly simple. Most people can't hold the tension between trust and accountability. They collapse into either extreme, too open, and they're exploited, too rigid, and they're avoided. This frequency held both. It amplified goodwill, mirrored violation, and reset the instant realignment occurred. That's what transformed the entire framework. Because once you see that the true winning frequency in life isn't manipulation or submission, but reciprocal clarity, you stop fighting for dominance and start building ecosystems of mutual elevation. And that's how a strategy so distilled it could be written on a single page ended up outperforming the most sophisticated strategic minds on the planet. Now the question deepens. If a 4-principle code can outperform experts in a simulated field, what does it look like when you actually embody it? Because the real power of this approach isn't theoretical. It's in how it operates with actual humans, real emotional frequencies, and tangible consequences. And this is where most people finally see themselves reflected in the pattern. Because you've already encountered people who live this frequency without ever studying game theory or quantum mechanics. They're effortless to trust, impossible to manipulate, and somehow universally respected by nearly everyone in their field. You recognize them instantly. They begin interactions with genuine openness, not performative niceness, but authentic receptivity. They offer respect as their baseline rather than waiting for you to earn it. They assume positive intent instead of scanning for reasons to take offense. But the moment a boundary is crossed, they don't collapse, escalate, or beg. They respond with proportional clarity. Not with more intensity, not with withdrawal, just with unmistakable presence. And the instant you recalibrate your frequency, they drop the violation completely. No lingering resentment, no passive punishment, no emotional ledger keeping. Simply, you aligned, so I align. You departed, so I mirror. You returned, we continue. That is the reciprocal frequency embodied in real time, and it functions across every domain. Intimate partnerships, professional collaborations, family systems, creative teams, online communities, even brief encounters with strangers. Why does it work so universally? Because it dissolves the core issue in all human interaction, energetic uncertainty. People don't fear kindness. They fear invisible boundaries that shift without warning. They fear being punished for violations they didn't know existed. They fear someone who says everything's fine while silently cataloging resentment. But when your responses are coherent and proportional, people actually relax into authentic relating with you. They understand what you amplify, what you deflect, and that you're not secretly accumulating grievances in some hidden vault labeled eventually. Now consider the opposite frequency. The person who's endlessly accommodating, perpetually easygoing, always agreeable, until they suddenly detonate or vanish entirely. They think they're maintaining peace, but they're actually generating future chaos. Or the person who meets everything with suspicion, control, or defensive intensity. They believe they're protecting their energy, but they're actually training people to engage with them only when unavoidable. Both frequencies lose the long game, one because they never establish consequence, the other because they never allow reconnection. But the reciprocal code, the equal response principle, generates something far more valuable than protection. It generates reputation. And reputation is the currency that moves through every field you enter. When people observe that you initiate with collaboration, but enforce fairness without hesitation, they don't test you the same way. They don't deceive you the same way. They don't attempt to extract from you the same way, not from fear, but from clarity. They know precisely what frequency you're holding. And that makes you one of the rarest beings in any system someone genuinely worth aligning with. Let's go deeper into what reputation actually means in the quantum field. Most people think reputation is what others say about you when you're not in the room. That's the surface layer. The deeper truth is that reputation is the energetic signature you leave in every interaction. And that signature creates a gravitational pull in the field. When your signature is consistent, when people can predict with accuracy how you'll respond to cooperation versus violation, you become what's called a stable attractor point in the relational matrix. This is pure physics applied to human connection. Think of it like this. In chaos theory, there are patterns called strange attractors, points in a system where energy naturally flows and organizes around. When you operate from reciprocal clarity, you become one of these attractor points. People's energy naturally organizes around you because you provide something rare, predictability without rigidity, openness without naivety, strength without aggression. The field recognizes stable frequencies and begins routing more coherent interactions toward them. This isn't mysticism, it's how complex systems self-organize. And here's where it gets fascinating. When you become a stable attractor point through consistent reciprocal response, you don't just change your immediate relationships. You begin to shift the entire network you're connected to. Because everyone who interacts with you carries your frequency signature into their other interactions. They've experienced what it's like to engage with someone who has clear, fair, consistent boundaries. And unconsciously, they start expecting that same coherence elsewhere. Some will rise to meet it. Others will reveal they can't. But either way, you've introduced a new frequency into the collective field that wasn't there before. This is the ripple effect that most people never consider. They think their boundaries only affect their direct relationships. But every person you train to respect clear communication goes on to expect and potentially offer that same respect in their other relationships. You're not just changing your reality, you're seeding a new relational template into the morphic field that others can access and embody. This is how cultural shifts happen, not through mass movements, but through individuals embodying a new frequency so consistently that it becomes contagious. Once you understand how the mirror frequency operates in lived experience, something becomes undeniable. The real advantage doesn't emerge from overpowering others, outsmarting them, or being too defended to be hurt. It emerges from becoming the kind of presence people naturally want to cooperate with. That's the hidden code in the game. Not intimidation, not superiority, predictable fairness. The world already has countless people attempting to outmaneuver each other through manipulation. What it lacks is people who amplify honesty, respond proportionally, and don't poison future possibilities over a single misalignment. Because here's the truth. Most people don't grasp until they've lost what mattered. Defeating someone feels satisfying once, but earning someone's trust creates value that compounds infinitely. You don't need to be the most powerful frequency in any room when you're the one everyone would rather collaborate with than work around. This is what the reciprocity principle teaches. Strength doesn't mean never being tested. It means being someone who can't be violated twice without energetic cost, and someone who resets the moment respect is restored. It's an entirely different paradigm of power. You stop exhausting yourself trying to control others and instead influence reality through consistent clarity. You don't force loyalty. You create conditions where loyalty is the most intelligent choice. People recognize that if they engage fairly with you, they receive fairness in return. If they betray your frequency, they lose access to the benefits that cooperation provided. That's not weakness. That's architecture. And architecture wins across every dimension of existence: business, leadership, intimate partnership, creative collaboration, community building, all of it. This is precisely why the optimal strategy doesn't require exceptional intelligence, tactical manipulation, or emotional detachment. It requires discipline to initiate with openness. Discipline to address violation immediately rather than emotionally. Discipline to release when the other person recalibrates. Discipline to choose fairness over revenge. Most people don't lose because they lack strength. They lose because they react from conditioning instead of operating from conscious code. Once you embody this understanding, you stop trying to defeat people and start constructing cooperative fields where everyone rises. Friend circles where collective frequency elevates professional networks, where trust becomes exponential. partnerships where respect is foundational, not something continuously negotiated. And this is the layer game theory reveals that lived reality confirms you don't ascend by diminishing others. You ascend by becoming the frequency with which cooperation becomes the most natural response. But here's where quantum mechanics adds the layer most game theory models miss. This isn't just about behavioral strategy. This is about how consciousness interfaces with the field itself. Every time you respond to someone, you're not just affecting that individual relationship. You're sending a signal into the larger quantum field about what your energy allows, what it amplifies, and what it repels. You're literally programming the holographic matrix of your reality with every boundary you enforce and every boundary you dissolve. Think about it through the lens of observer effect. In quantum physics, the act of observation collapses possibility into actuality. Your attention, your focus, your energetic response doesn't just witness reality, it participates in creating it. So when you tolerate violation without consequence, you're not just being nice. You're collapsing timelines where respect is the default. When you respond to betrayal with proportional clarity, you're not just defending yourself. You're collapsing timelines where your energy is recognized as something that cannot be taken lightly. Your responses are quantum measurements that determine which version of reality solidifies around you. This is why people who master the reciprocal frequency often seem to live in entirely different realities than those around them. They're not lucky, they're not privileged with better people. They've simply learned to send such consistent signals to the field that the field stops presenting misaligned interactions. The universe is always listening to what you allow. It's always watching what you reinforce. It's always calibrating what to send you next. Based on what you've demonstrated, you'll accept. Let me give you a concrete example of how this works in practice. Imagine you have a friend who consistently shows up late to plans with you. The first time, you say nothing. From the quantum field's perspective, you just collapsed a timeline where lateness has no consequence. The second time, you make a joke about it but still proceed as normal. You've now reinforced that timeline. The third time, you feel frustrated but still don't address it directly. By now, the field has learned that this person can be late with you without energetic cost. You've trained both the person and the field that your time doesn't have firm boundaries. Now watch what happens when you shift your response. The next time they're late, you calmly and clearly say, "I value our time together." And when you're late without communication, it feels disrespectful of my time. Moving forward, I need you to either be on time or let me know in advance if something comes up. Otherwise, I'll only wait 15 minutes before I leave. You've just collapsed an entirely different timeline. One where your time has value and boundaries have consequence. The person now has a choice: respect the boundary or lose access to your energy. Either way, you've shifted the frequency of what's possible in that relationship. And here's what most people don't realize. That shift doesn't just affect that one friend. It sends a signal through your entire relational field, other people in your life. Without you ever having to have the same conversation with them, will unconsciously sense the shift in your frequency. They'll start showing up differently because the field around you has changed. This is quantum entanglement applied to human consciousness. When you change the way you interface with one part of your reality, all parts of your reality feel the shift. Here's the practice most people never engage with. Start noticing your energetic responses in real time, not hours later when you're replaying the conversation, but in the actual moment of interaction. When someone crosses a boundary, what's your immediate frequency? Do you collapse into people-pleasing? Do you escalate into defensiveness? Do you freeze and avoid? Or do you hold your center and respond with clear, proportional feedback? That moment, that split second between their action and your response, is where your reality gets written. And here's what shifts everything. You don't need to be harsh. You don't need to be cold. You don't need to punish or lecture or make someone feel small. You simply need to be clear. That doesn't work for me. I need you to honor what we agreed on. If this continues, I'll need to adjust how we engage. Simple, clean, proportional, no emotional charge. No drama, just clarity. And then, the instant they recalibrate, you match that. You don't hold the grudge. You don't make them pay for 3 more interactions. You reset. Clean slate, new moment. That's the frequency that changes everything. Now, what we're exploring here is just one layer of how frequency and consciousness interface with reality itself. This reciprocal strategy is actually part of a much larger system of conscious transmission, what I call becoming the broadcast, rather than searching for the signal. If you're feeling the resonance of these principles and want to understand the complete quantum architecture behind how your frequency literally constructs your reality, I've mapped the entire journey in my book, Beyond the Frequencies, a quantum guide to consciousness mastery. It takes you through the 9 master frequencies, from breaking free from survival static all the way to embodying witness consciousness and living as the field itself. It's linked in the pinned comment below. Most people think they need to be harder or softer. What they actually need is to be clearer. Clarity is what the field responds to. Clarity is what people trust. Clarity is what builds the kind of reputation where your presence alone shifts how others show up. Now let's address the fear that comes up for almost everyone when they first encounter this teaching. But what if I respond with consequence and they leave? What if I lose the relationship? Here's the truth that might sting initially, but will liberate you completely. If someone leaves because you enforced a boundary, they were never in authentic relationship with you. They were in relationship with your tolerance of their misalignment. And that's not connection. That's extraction. When you start operating from reciprocal clarity, yes, some people will fall away, and every single one of them needed to, because they were occupying space that prevented aligned people from entering. You can't call in your true frequency matches while you're tolerating people who only stayed because you never asked them to show up correctly. This is the initiation most people avoid. They'd rather keep the misaligned familiar than face the temporary void that comes with clearing the field. But that void isn't empty. It's fertile. It's the space where everything you've actually been asking for can finally land. Because the universe can't deliver aligned connections to someone whose field is already full of tolerated misalignment, you have to clear the frequency first. And that clearing happens through consequence, through boundaries, through the willingness to mirror violation and let people choose whether they want to stay in coherence with you or not. And here's what becomes magical once you've cleared your field. The people who remain, the people who recalibrate when you mirror their misalignment, the people who respect your boundaries and even thank you for having them, those people become your true relational ecosystem. Those are the ones who match your frequency. Those are the ones worth building with. And suddenly, you're no longer exhausted by relationships, you're energized by them. Because you're finally in coherent collaboration instead of constant compensation. There's another dimension to this that connects directly to manifestation principles. When you hold fuzzy boundaries, when you tolerate misalignment, when you accept less than reciprocal respect, you're sending a very specific signal to the quantum field about what you believe you deserve. And the field, being perfectly neutral and responsive, continues to deliver experiences that match that signal. This is why people who struggle with boundaries often find themselves in pattern after pattern of being undervalued, overlooked, or taken advantage of. It's not that they're unlucky or that the universe is against them. It's that their energetic signature is broadcasting, "I accept less than I'm worth." And the field delivers exactly that. But when you begin enforcing reciprocal clarity, when you mirror cooperation with cooperation and violation with consequence, you're sending an entirely different signal. You're broadcasting, "I know my value, and I only engage in mutually respectful exchange." The field receives that signal and begins reorganizing reality to match it. Opportunities that honor your worth start appearing. People who respect boundaries naturally gravitate toward you. Situations that would have previously drained you simply don't enter your experience anymore, because your frequency is no longer a match for them. This is the intersection of game theory and manifestation that almost no one talks about. Your boundaries aren't just social constructs. They're energetic declarations to the universe about what you're available for and what you're not. Every time you enforce a boundary, you're essentially telling the quantum field, "This frequency is not compatible with mine." And every time you reward cooperation, you're declaring, "This is the frequency I amplify and attract more of." You're quite literally programming your reality through your relational responses. Drop a comment below and share what boundary you're committing to hold this week. What frequency you're choosing to stop tolerating. Take a moment here. Pause the video if you need to. Let this land in your body, not just your mind. Feel into the places where you've been tolerating misalignment because you were afraid of the consequence of addressing it. Feel into the relationships where you've been overgiving because you didn't trust that reciprocal fairness was possible. Feel into the patterns where you've been the one always extending, always forgiving, always understanding, while others just kept taking. That ends now. Not through aggression, not through withdrawal, through calibrated clarity, through reciprocal response, through the willingness to be someone who cannot be crossed without consequence and cannot be respected without reward. This is the frequency that bends reality. Not because it manipulates, but because it aligns. The quantum field doesn't respond to what you wish or hope or think. It responds to what you consistently demonstrate. And when you demonstrate through your boundaries and your responses that you are someone who amplifies cooperation and mirrors violation, the field begins sending you people and situations that match that clarity. You stop attracting people who need to test you. You start attracting people who already know how to show up. That's not magic. That's mechanics. Quantum mechanics meeting relational strategy meeting conscious embodiment. Now, if this frequency is resonating with something inside you, if you're recognizing your own patterns in this reflection, then take a moment and comment below with this exact phrase. I choose reciprocal clarity. Not as a casual comment, as an energetic declaration to the field, as a conscious interruption in the unconscious loop, as a signal that you're no longer available for misaligned relating. Drop that phrase in the comments and let it mark the moment your frequency shifted. And here's the final layer that ties everything together. This isn't just about your individual relationships. This is about collective consciousness. Every time you choose reciprocal clarity over people-pleasing or over aggression, you're not just changing your personal reality. You're sending a signal through the morphic field that this is possible. You're becoming a template for others who are ready to stop playing the unconscious game. You're demonstrating that there's a third way beyond doormat or dictator. Between pushover or bully, you're showing that it's possible to be both kind and boundaried, both open and discerning, both forgiving and clear about what's acceptable. And as more people embody this frequency, the entire collective field begins to shift. Because consciousness is contagious. Frequency is transferable. When people encounter someone operating from reciprocal clarity, something in them remembers that they could do the same. You become a permission slip for others to stop tolerating what diminishes them. You become a mirror showing them that strength and softness aren't opposites, they're partners. This is how movements begin, not through loud revolution, but through quiet embodiment. One person at a time choosing to stop participating in unconscious patterns, one interaction at a time demonstrating that there's a more coherent way. One boundary at a time showing that respect doesn't require force, it just requires consistency. So if what you're hearing right now is touching something deeper than intellectual understanding, if it's activating a knowing that's been waiting for permission to emerge, then I invite you to subscribe to this channel. Not just to receive content, but to join a frequency. This space is for people who are done with surface-level spirituality that avoids the messy human stuff. This is for people who understand that real transformation happens in relationship, in boundary setting, in the willingness to be both loving and unmoved by manipulation. Subscribe to stay in this conversation, to stay in this field, to stay connected to the community of people who are choosing conscious relating over unconscious reaction. Because here's what most spiritual teachings won't tell you. Enlightenment isn't about transcending the human game. It's about playing it with full consciousness. It's about bringing awareness to every interaction, every response, every moment where you're either teaching people how to treat you or allowing the old program to run. The real work isn't in some cave on a mountain. It's in the text message you send when someone crosses your boundary. It's in the conversation you have when someone tries to guilt you into tolerating their bad behavior. It's in the moment you choose clarity over comfort. That's where the transformation lives. That's where reality bends. Let's talk about the neuroscience behind why this strategy works so effectively. When you respond to someone with proportional clarity instead of emotional reactivity, you're engaging your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for executive function and rational decision-making, rather than your amygdala, which governs fight or flight responses. This means you're literally rewiring your neural pathways every time you choose conscious response over unconscious reaction. Over time, this creates what neuroscientists call neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to form new neural connections and patterns. But here's what makes this even more powerful. When you consistently respond from your prefrontal cortex, from that place of centered clarity, you're not just changing your own brain, you're actually influencing the nervous systems of the people you interact with. Mirror neurons, the neurons that fire both when we act and when we observe someone else acting, mean that when someone experiences your calm, proportional response to a boundary violation, their brain is literally mirroring that pattern. You're teaching them, at a neurological level, that there's a way to address conflict without collapsing or exploding. This is why people often report that after they start implementing reciprocal clarity, the people in their lives gradually become less reactive and more reasonable, even without explicit conversation about it. It's not that you've magically changed them. It's that you've consistently modeled a different neurological response pattern, and their mirror neurons have been quietly learning from it. This is embodied teaching at its finest. You're not preaching about boundaries. You're demonstrating them at a frequency their nervous system can entrain to. So here's your practice moving forward. For the next 7 days, track your responses. Not your thoughts about your responses, your actual energetic reactions in real time. When someone does something that feels misaligned, what do? Do you ignore it? Do you explode? Do you people please? Or do you hold center and respond with proportional clarity? Just notice. Don't judge yourself. Just gather data on your current frequency. Because you can't shift what you're not aware of. And most people are running completely unconscious programs in their relational field. Then, once you have that data, start experimenting with calibrated responses. Small adjustments. If your pattern is to always let things go, try addressing one small thing with clear, calm feedback. If your pattern is to always escalate, try responding with proportional energy instead of maximum force. If your pattern is to avoid entirely, try staying present and communicating your boundary in real time. These micro-adjustments will feel uncomfortable at first. That discomfort is the sign that you're deprogramming the old frequency and installing the new one. And watch what happens. Watch how people respond differently when you respond differently. Watch how the field starts sending you different interactions. Watch how your reality begins to reorganize around your new frequency. This isn't theory. This is experiential. This is something you can test and verify in your own lived experience. Here's another layer that deepens the practice. Start paying attention to the moments just before you would typically collapse your boundary. There's usually a sensation in your body, a tightening in your chest, a flutter in your stomach, a tension in your throat. That's your nervous system preparing to abandon your needs in favor of keeping the peace. When you feel that sensation, pause. Take 3 deep breaths. Feel your feet on the ground. And then respond from that grounded place, instead of from the panic of potential abandonment or conflict. This is somatic work-meeting game theory. Your body holds the patterns of how you've learned to survive in relationship. Maybe you learned early that speaking up led to punishment, so you developed a freeze response. Maybe you learned that expressing needs meant being abandoned, so you developed a fawn response. These patterns are stored in your nervous system, and they'll keep running the show until you consciously interrupt them with new experiences. Every time you feel that old survival response activate and you choose to breathe through it and respond with clarity anyway, you're building new somatic pathways. You're teaching your body that it's safe to have boundaries, that you won't die if someone is momentarily uncomfortable with your clarity, that relationships can actually become stronger, not weaker, when both people know exactly where they stand. This is the work that most people skip. They try to implement boundaries from a purely cognitive place, deciding they should have better boundaries, and then they wonder why they keep collapsing under pressure. It's because the body hasn't been brought along for the journey. The nervous system is still running old programming that says boundaries equal danger. You have to tend to the somatic layer, reassuring your body through repeated safe experiences that clarity leads to better connection, not loss. And here's where the quantum field responds in the most remarkable ways. When you heal these somatic patterns, when your body genuinely feels safe enforcing boundaries, your frequency becomes unshakable. And an unshakable frequency is like a lighthouse in a storm. It doesn't try to control the waves, it just stands firm, sending out its signal. And the ships that are meant to find it always do. The people who are ready for reciprocal relating will feel drawn to your stability. The people who need someone with fuzzy boundaries to exploit will naturally drift away, not because you pushed them out, but because your frequency is no longer compatible. with their pattern. Before we close, drop one word in the comments that captures the energy or intention you're choosing moving forward. Not a sentence. One word. Your energetic signature to the quantum field, and then read through what others have shared. Feel into the collective frequency we're building here, because this isn't just about individual transformation. This is about weaving a new relational template into the collective consciousness. And every person who chooses this path makes it easier for the next person to find it. If you haven't already, subscribe now, not just to stay connected, but to stay coherent. To stay in the frequency of people who are choosing awareness over autopilot, clarity over confusion, reciprocal fairness over unconscious patterns. The more of us who embody this, the more the world reflects it back. This is how we shift reality, not by fighting what's broken, but by embodying what's aligned, not by fixing others, but by becoming unshakable in our own frequency. Not by demanding change, but by being the change so undeniably that others can't help but feel the invitation to match it. Now let's explore how this strategy interfaces with the concept of energetic sovereignty, because this is where most people give away their power without realizing it. Energetic sovereignty means you are the sole authority over your energetic field. No one gets to determine your frequency except you. No one gets to violate your boundaries and have you remain unchanged. No one gets to cooperate with you and go unrewarded. You are the quantum observer of your own relational reality, and your consistent responses are what collapse the wave function into the specific reality you experience. But here's where it gets tricky. Most people confuse sovereignty with isolation. They think being sovereign means never being affected by others, never being vulnerable, never letting anyone in. That's not sovereignty. That's defense. True sovereignty is knowing that you can be open, you can be affected, you can be moved by others, and still maintain your center. It's the difference between a rigid wall and a flexible boundary. The wall keeps everything out, including the good. The flexible boundary allows flow while maintaining integrity. When you operate from reciprocal clarity, you're practicing true sovereignty. You're saying, I'm open to connection, and I'm clear about what I allow within that connection. You're not building walls. You're building permeable membranes that let coherent energy in and reflect incoherent energy back to its source. This is advanced energetic architecture, and it's what separates people who merely survive relationships from people who thrive within them. Think about the last time someone violated your boundary and you didn't address it. In that moment, you gave up your sovereignty. You allowed someone else's choice to determine your energetic state without consequence. You collapsed into victimhood, even if you didn't call it that. Now think about a time when someone violated your boundary and you addressed it clearly and immediately. You maintained your sovereignty. You remained the author of your energetic experience. Even if the conversation was uncomfortable, even if the person didn't like your boundary, you didn't abandon yourself. That's the practice. Not perfection, but the consistent choice to remain sovereign in your own field. Here's another dimension that connects to ancestral patterns and generational healing. The way you respond in relationships isn't just affecting you and the person in front of you, it's potentially healing or perpetuating patterns that have been running in your family line for generations. If you come from a lineage of people who couldn't speak their truth, who had to survive by being small, by accepting disrespect, by tolerating violation, then every time you choose reciprocal clarity, you're completing something that your ancestors couldn't complete. You're breaking a cycle. You're introducing a new frequency into your family's morphic field. and this work ripples both forward and backward in time. The children who observe you holding boundaries with grace learn that it's possible they internalize a different template than the one you inherited. The ancestors who couldn't do this work in their lifetime feel the shift in the collective field. This isn't metaphor. Epigenetics shows us that trauma and behavioral patterns are passed down through generations at a cellular level. And when you shift the pattern, when you literally embody a different relational frequency, you're changing the genetic expression, not just for yourself, but potentially for your entire lineage. This is why boundary work is sacred work. It's not selfish. It's not small. It's literally healing across timelines. Every moment you choose consciousness over conditioning, you're serving something far greater than your individual comfort. Let's also address what happens when you're in a relationship or system where the other person refuses to play reciprocally. Where they keep violating, you keep mirroring consequence, and they keep coming back with violation. This is where the strategy reveals its final teaching. At a certain point, if someone demonstrates that they cannot or will not operate reciprocally, the most aligned response isn't to keep playing with them, it's to exit the game with that person entirely. This is what's called a permanent defection in game theory. And it's not a failure, it's data. Some people, whether because of their own unhealed trauma, their nervous system capacity, or their current consciousness level, cannot engage in reciprocal relating. And your job isn't to fix them. Your job isn't to stay in repeated violation, hoping they'll eventually wake up. Your job is to honor the data and remove your energy from a system that cannot hold reciprocity. This is where many people get stuck. They understand the strategy intellectually. They implement it faithfully, and then they feel guilty when it reveals that someone in their life needs to be released. They think compassion means staying. But real compassion, the kind that honors everyone's highest good, sometimes means loving someone from a distance. It means recognizing that continuing to engage with someone who can't reciprocate is actually enabling their pattern and depleting your own field. The most loving thing you can do for both of you is to exit with clarity and without malice. Here's the language for that. I've noticed that we have different approaches to relationship, and I don't think we're a good match for continued connection. I wish you well, and I'm choosing to redirect my energy toward relationships that feel more aligned. Clean, clear, no blame, no drama. Just data and decision. This is mastery. Being able to release without resentment, to exit without making the other person wrong, to simply acknowledge incompatibility and move on. And what's fascinating is that sometimes, when you make that clean exit, when you stop engaging entirely, the other person finally gets the wake-up call they needed. Sometimes the only consequence that actually lands is the complete removal of access to your energy. Not because you're punishing them, but because you're honoring your own sovereignty. And occasionally, that space creates the opportunity for them to do their own work and potentially return at a later time with genuine shift. But you can't count on that. And you can't stay in harmful patterns hoping for it. The exit has to be real, motivated by your own integrity, not by a secret agenda to change them. Now let's bring this into the realm of collective transformation. Imagine if even just 10% of people on this planet started operating from reciprocal clarity, started rewarding cooperation and mirroring violation consistently, started releasing relationships that couldn't hold reciprocity. What would happen? The entire social structure would begin to reorganize. The systems that rely on people tolerating exploitation would collapse. The individuals who operate through manipulation would find fewer and fewer people to manipulate. The cultures of passive aggression and unclear communication would dissolve in the face of clear, proportional response. This isn't utopian fantasy. This is system dynamics. When enough nodes in a network shift their operating frequency, the entire network reorganizes around the new pattern. You are a node in the collective human network. And every interaction where you choose reciprocal clarity is a signal to the network that a different way is possible. You don't need everyone to shift. You just need enough people to reach critical mass. And then the shift becomes inevitable. This is why your individual choices matter far more than you've been told. You're not just managing your personal relationships. You're participating in a collective awakening to more conscious, coherent ways of relating. Every boundary you hold is a vote for a different world. Every time you mirror violation and reward cooperation, you're demonstrating what's possible. Every time you exit an unreciprocal system with grace, you're creating space for something more aligned to emerge. The quantum field is always listening. The collective morphic field is always recording. And the more consistently you broadcast a frequency of reciprocal clarity, the more that frequency becomes available for others to tune into. You become a radio tower transmitting a new station, and people who are ready to hear it will find you. People who are still operating on the old frequency won't be able to hold the connection. That's not rejection. That's resonance sorting itself out. Here's what I want you to understand deeply. This work requires patience. You're not going to shift years or decades of conditioning in a single week. You're not going to suddenly have perfect boundaries in every situation. You're going to fumble. You're going to collapse back into old patterns sometimes. You're going to overcorrect and be too rigid, then swing back and be too loose. And slowly, through trial and error, find your center. That's the process. That's what it looks like to reprogram your relational operating system. The key is to stay in the practice, to keep noticing, to keep adjusting, to keep choosing consciousness even when unconsciousness would be easier, to keep honoring your boundaries even when it would be more comfortable to let them slide, to keep mirroring violation even when you'd rather just avoid the conflict, to keep resetting and offering cooperation even when you'd rather hold a grudge. This is the discipline. And discipline, repeated over time, becomes your new natural state. If you found value in this transmission, consider watching it again tomorrow morning to anchor these frequencies before your day begins. Or share it with someone who's ready to shift their relational patterns. Because when you pass this understanding forward, you're not just helping them. You're reinforcing your own embodiment of these principles and creating an energetic ripple that accelerates transformation in the collective field. Eventually, you won't have to think about it. Your nervous system will be so rewired, your frequency so established, that reciprocal clarity will just be who you are. People will describe you as someone who's easy to be around, but impossible to manipulate. Someone who's kind, but not a pushover. Someone who forgives easily, but doesn't tolerate repeated disrespect. That reputation won't be something you're trying to cultivate. It will just be the natural result of consistent practice over time. And the reality you'll find yourself in will be unrecognizable compared to where you started. The people in your life will be higher caliber. The opportunities that come your way will be more aligned. The drama will be minimal because you'll have stopped participating in unconscious relational patterns. The trust will be deeper because everyone knows exactly where they stand with you. The reciprocity will be real because you've trained your field to only accept reciprocal engagement. This is what's available when you commit to the practice. Not perfection, not a life without challenges, but a life where you're the conscious author of your relational reality instead of a passive recipient of whatever anyone decides to bring to you. A life where your boundaries create safety instead of rigidity. A life where your openness creates connection instead of vulnerability to exploitation. A life where game theory and quantum mechanics and conscious embodiment all merge into a way of being that serves your highest good and the highest good of everyone you encounter. You came to this video for a reason, not by accident, not by algorithm alone. Something in your consciousness recognized that it was time to understand the deeper game time, to stop reacting and start responding. Time to stop being surprised by repeated patterns and start shaping the field with intentional frequency. That recognition is the beginning. What you do with it determines everything that comes next. You now have the code. The question is, will you run it? Will you embody it? Will you become the frequency that bends reality simply by being consistently, undeniably, proportionally clear about what you allow and what you amplify? The game is always running. You're always in it. The only question is whether you're playing consciously or unconsciously. And now that you know, you can never pretend you don't. That's both the burden and the gift of awareness. Welcome to the frequency. Welcome to the game. Welcome to the version of reality where your responses write your future. Make them count.